ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. My dear friends, I am going to narrate the story of Maitreyi, the consort of Maharishi Yajnavalkya. This story occurred in Vedic era. This story is full of Brahmagyan and Atmagyan. Maitreyi was a great sage herself, and she was always discussing Brahmagyan and Atmagyan with her husband, says Yajnavalkya. Says Yajnavalkya was a very learned and dynamic sage of Vedic era. He has contributed a lot in the Yajurveda. So let us start with the story. So the writer says, to understand his story, the reader must, whether he be in Madras or elsewhere, transplant himself in imagination to Bihar. He must also avail himself of the same conveyance in going over a period of about 4,000 years, because I am speaking of a time when those far off events were occurring which furnished materials for the composition of the Upanishads, and which we find recorded in these ancient treatises. Let us take our stand in the outskirts of the ancient city of Janakpur in Mithila. Let us rather fly about in the air on the wings of a fancy around the city, for that would give us a broader outlook and enable us better to see what is taking place around us. Janakpur, I need not scarcely remind the reader, was the city of the royal sage Rajrishi, who was the greatest patron of learning in ancient times, and the friend and theological associate of the sage Yajnavalkya. Later legends also describe him as the father of Sita and the father-in-law of Rama. Let us, as I have already proposed, fly about in the air on a rather desolate plain interspersed with hillocks in the outskirts of the ancient city of Janaka. It is a fine summer morning, the day only an hour and a half old. We see three travelers slowly making their way towards the city through the plain. All the three are tall and strongly built, very different from the present inhabitants of Bihar. Two of them are armed in the fashion of those days, each having a bow in hand, a case of arrows slung on the back, and a sheathed sword hanging from the waist. A single glance would be enough to show the class to which they belong, the Akshatriya. The third person, by the simplicity and neatness of his dress, The grave earnestness of his face and the exquisite purity of his speech could easily be recognized as a learned Brahman. He is, in fact, no less a personage than the sage Mitra, a most trusted minister of Janaka, and is just returning to his home in Janakpur under the escort of the warriors after discharging some important mission entrusted by the king in a neighboring town. About the rank and duties of the two Kshatriyas we shall learn more as our story proceeds. At the present moment, let us hear a part of the conversation in which the three travelers seem absorbed. One of the Kshatriyas addressed the sage and says, Revered sir, since my return from Benares, I have been marking a peculiar anxiety in your face. Even now, I observe that your mind is wandering and getting listless in the midst of our talk. If you have no objection to speaking out to us, we shall be highly obliged by your letting us know the cause of your anxiety. Mitra, Yajnadatta, there is nothing that I would hide from you and Vishnu Mitra. Vishnu Mitra marked my anxiety on the very next day after the great meeting and inquired into its cause. I told him I would speak to him later on, but have not hitherto got an opportunity. Now that I have got both of you together and can speak undisturbed, I have no objection to opening my mind to you. Yajnadatta, what great meeting do you speak of? I was away and have heard nothing about it. When I started for Benares, I saw preparations going on in the palace for a great yajna. Do you refer to any meeting connected with the ceremony? Vishnu Mitra says, Your absence has made you a great loser. I have never seen another meeting like that, nor have ever heard of anything similar. Yajnadatta, which of our learned men spoke at the meeting? Vishnu Mitra says, None of the more eminent ones was silent, but the Lady Gargi's speech and that of the sage Yajnavalkya in reply to her questions are the most worthy of mention. Yajnadatta, what was the subject of discussion? Vishnu Mitra, no particular subject was fixed beforehand. Those present put various questions to the sage on a variety of subjects. They were like a torrent of rain in the rainy season. He had to touch upon different subjects in answering these questions. See, this story occurs in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the largest Upanishad of all. The Lady Gargi questioned him on the all-pervasiveness of Brahma and the sage Uddalaka on Brahma as the inner ruler, Antaryamin. As soon as I get leisure, I shall speak to you in detail about those questions and the substance of Yajnavalkya's answer to them. I have never before or since heard such a beautiful exposition of the divine nature as he gave on the occasion. Yajnadatta. What led the others to attack him? Mitra. He had acted rather indiscreetly at first, and that was what led to the attack. However, its result was very good. On no other occasion did Yajnavalkya's learning and spiritual experience shine forth so brightly as in that memorable meeting. He is yet a young man, only 30, if such is the splendor of his genius in the prime of his life. How great will it be when he attains the fullness of manhood? It is a wonder how the sage Vaishampayana could quarrel with such a worthy disciple of his and deprive of the rights of a pupil. Yajnadatta, I don't think that will injure Yajnavalkya anyway, nor will it cause any loss to us. Yajnavalkya was right in characterizing the Veda taught by Vaisampayana as the Black Yajurveda. I have heard that Veda from some of his pupils. Text and comment, mantra and Brahmana are so strangely mixed up in it that its study is like entering a dark room. Such a Veda might very well be called black. I hope the white Yajurveda, which the sage is now compiling with your help, will deserve its name. However, I have a mind to inquire more particularly about it and another occasion. Be good enough to tell me now why the torrent of questions that Vishnumitra speaks of was poured upon Yajnavalkya. Mitra, the king enclosed 1,000 cows with their horns encased in gold leaves near the place of meeting and said to those assembled, Yea, venerable Brahmanas, let him who is the wisest Brahmanistha among you drive away these cows. Now, here there is a reference. This refers to the circumstances that led to the division of the Yajurveda into two Sakhas or branches. Krishna black and Shukla white, the former associated with the name of Vaisampayana and the later with that of Yajnavalkya. See the details in introduction to the author's English edition of the Upanishads. Okay, Yajnadatta, strange, who would have the immodesty to declare himself the wisest? Mitra says, so I said that Yajnavalkya acted rather indiscreetly at first. You know how fond he is of cows. It has grown into a weakness in him. When he saw that all were silent and no one claimed the cows, he said to one of his pupils, My dear boy, drive these cows to my house. Yajnadatta, oh, how strange, Mitra says. His conduct indeed seemed strange to all, and there was an angry, though suppressed talk throughout the assembly. At last, Asvala, the Hotri priest of Janaka, gave vent to his angry feeling and addressed Yajnavalkya thus. Do you really think, sir, that you are the wisest among us? Yajnavalkya said, I bow down before the wisest, but I wish indeed to have these cows. Perhaps you would have no objection to my having them if I could answer all questions put to me. I should be very glad to be questioned. This was the signal for the torrent of questions to which Vishnu Mitra refers. You may, at your leisure, hear the whole matter from him. Yajnadatta. I shall certainly do so, but be good enough now to answer my main question. I have been forgetting it in inquiring about the meeting. What is the cause of your anxiety and what has it to do with the meeting we have been talking about? Mitra. The cause of my anxiety is my daughter. She is now 18 and I should be glad to give her away in marriage. But I have failed in this. Vishnu Mitra, what can your failure mean? It is rare to find a girl so beautiful and excellent as your daughter. And then you have given her an education which scarcely any other young lady among us has received. I have often said to my friends that Maitreyi will very soon grow into a lady scholar and orator as eminent as her aunt Gargi. Can there be any difficulty in finding a match for such an accomplished lady? Our city is full of learned young men. Mitra, there is no dearth of learned and well behaved young men. My failure in giving away Maitreyi is not due to that. Maitreyi's education, which you have so much praised, stands in the way of her marriage. Yajnadatta, how, Mitra? You know that since his separation from Vesampayana, Yajnavalkya has been busy with myself in compiling a new Yajurveda. The small body of compilers meet every day in my house. In these meetings, we often put off our chief work and discuss spiritual topics such as the nature of Brahma, the mode of worshipping him, and so on. These discussions prove so delightful and edifying to us that deep absorption in them often makes us forget food and sleep. Gargi attends these meetings very frequently. You know, my daughter is deeply attached to my sister in law. Wherever her aunt goes, she must go as a matter of course. She followed her even to that great meeting, which brought together learned men from all parts of the country. She could not indeed sit near Gargi, but had to sit with the other ladies on the right wing of the great square, for Gargi had her seat in the inmost ring of the square among the most learned of the guests. However, what I have to say about my daughter is this. I did not know that such a young girl as she understood anything about the subjects of our discussion, but I now see she spends almost the whole day in thinking and speaking about these matters. This is what prevents her marriage. Vishnu Mitra, how can your daughter be other than what you describe her to be? There is nothing strange in her becoming a theologian at 18. I see that my prophecy is going to be fulfilled. Do you mean that she wishes to be a brahmacharini like her aunt Mitra? Very nearly. She says, I shall either take the vow of celibacy like Aunt Gargi, or if you can make it possible, I shall marry Yajnavalkya. This idea has taken a strong hold of her mind ever since that great meeting. You see now what the meeting has to do with my anxiety. Yajnadatta, I see, but I don't quite understand your difficulty. It seems to me that Yajnavalkya will only be too glad to accept your daughter's hand. Mitra, you say so only because you don't know Yajnavalkya's domestic life. Perhaps you know so far that he is a married man. He has married the daughter of my esteemed free friend Katya. This young lady is a worthy wife of Yajna Valkya in almost all respects. She is a most beautiful woman, very skillful in household management, and possesses above all such a soft and sweet disposition that once seen and spoken to, she can never be forgotten. Whenever I visit Yajnavalkya's house, she greets me in such sweet terms, and her face is brightened with such a beautiful smile in which modesty mingles with the heartfelt reverence that I cannot avoid thinking of her as a goddess in human shape. I understand that Yajnavalkya is deeply attached to this excellent wife. I cannot think of impairing this domestic happiness by bringing about a second marriage, even if he should be induced to contract one. Especially my daughter is young and inexperienced. I cannot be sure that she will always act discreetly. Vishnumitra, you used an almost in describing the Lady Katyani. Will you kindly tell me what you mean by it? Mitra, smiling, in saying that Katyani is a worthy wife of our young sage in almost all respects, I mean that though accomplished in all other ways, she feels no interest in theological subjects. She is always busy with household matters, serving her husband and looking after her children. She has no learned inquisitiveness like my daughter and sister-in-law, Yajna Datta. Then I see there is room enough in Yajnavalkya's house for our Maitreyi. She would fill up that portion of his happiness which the Lady Katyani has left unfilled. Mitra, to fill up that portion or leave it unfilled is Yajnavalkya's own concern. Why should other people meddle with it? Even while uttering the last sentence, Mitra stopped and gazed awestruck towards a certain direction. Long before this, the travelers had entered a woody and somewhat narrow path lined with hillocks. A few moments back, Mitra, while still speaking, had marked a solitary figure on the top of a hillock with a beautiful ring of trees around it. He had marked the figure, had observed that it was that of a man absorbed in meditation and was trying to recognize him. What now arrested Mitra's course was the recognition that the person on the hilltop was no other than Yajnavalkya and the instantaneous discovery that the sage was in danger. A huge tiger was leering at him and approaching him with slow steps, while the sage, with his senses quite closed against the outer world, knew nothing of the dreadful intruder. Mitra immediately pointed out the danger to the Kshatriyas. In a moment, they took an arrow each and aimed it at the tiger. The arrows pierced the eyes of the animal and made him motionless. They shot again and fixed two more arrows on his breast. The next moment they came up to the prostrate beast and cut it in two with their swords. Its dying howl disturbed the sage's meditation and made him open his eyes. He realized the whole affair at a glance and in deep gratitude touched the feet of the old sage and embraced the Kshatriyas. He thanked them again and again for the wonderful deliverance they had effected. The place, however, was felt as too unsafe to loiter in even with the brave and strong escort of the warriors, and they hurried to the city with quick steps and parted from one another as one by one they neared their respective homes. Now, the co-wives. The event recorded in the last part of the first chapter did not directly help the fulfillment of Mitra's desire. If he had been a low-minded man, he would have proposed his daughter's marriage with Yajnavalkya as a reward for saving his life. The social condition of the country in those days was such that under such favorable circumstances, no impropriety would be felt in offering a beautiful and accomplished bride to a man, even if he were married, and the man to whom such an offer would be made would rather be pleased with it. Such would really be the case with the ordinary man, but the reader must have seen from what he has learned in the first chapter that Mitra and Yajnavalkya were both extraordinary men, so the union of Maitreyi with the latter was not easily effected. The direct effect, however, of the tiger incident was a deepening of friendship between the two sages, which again led to an exchange of visits between the female members of the two families. One great result of this was that a close friendship grew up between Maitreyi and Katyani. To understand my story well, the reader must know a little more about these ladies than what he has already been told. They were nearly of the same age, Katyani being only 2 or 3 years older than her friend, but their natures were in almost all respects opposite to one another. And it was this oppositeness that lay at the bottom of their fondness for each other. Each saw in the other what was lacking in each and was thereby drawn to her. Katyani had a great heart easily inclined to love. The lovable had only to present itself to her and her heart rushed to it. She was of an extremely emotional character. Her face brightened with smiles the moment she saw an object of love, and her eyes filled with tears as soon as she saw or heard anything to sadden her. Her mind was somewhat light and shallow. She could spend hours in amusement and in hearing stories, but she could not attend for any length of time to such serious subjects as her husband dealt with. But she had nevertheless a strong sense of duty, a deep reverence for her husband, and the tenderest affection for the two little children with which she had up to this time been blessed. She spent almost the whole day in minding her husband's comforts and in bringing up her children, and her home was a model for order and neatness. In several respects, Maitreyi's character was the very opposite of the one I have just described. She had indeed a capacity for love, but her love was practically confined to a chosen few. Her eyes and ears seemed to be turned inside so that outward sights or sounds, whether lovely or unlovely, could not easily move her heart. Her face wore a gravity and earnestness much beyond her eyes. A amusements, talks, and stories, the common delight of women, were not indeed unpleasant to her, but they could not occupy her long. She spent most of her time in the study of serious subjects, especially those of a metaphysical nature. She attended to only as much of the household duty of her father's house as she felt called upon to attend to. She had really no liking for such duties. However, a deep friendship, as I have already said, grew up between these two women of opposite natures. Katyani, especially as might be expected, grew very fond of Maitreyi. Meeting with her as became one of her greatest pleasures, and parting from her one of her greatest pains. One day the following conversation took place between them. Katyani, I often think what will become of me when you are married. The marriage of each of my sisters has proved a great trial to me, but separation from them has now become just bearable. Parting from you will perhaps kill me. Maitri, you need not think of parting from me. We shall never part. Katyani, what do you mean? If you happen to be married near me, we shall indeed meet frequently. But how can I hope that your home will be near? Maitri, how do you know that I shall be married at all? Katyani, you too remain unmarried? This idea is strange. Many will seek your hand. Maitri, what if I encourage none of them? Katyani, why? Do you wish to be a brahmacharini? I don't like the practice. It seems to me that domestic life is the proper sphere of women. Maitreyi, domestic life is the proper sphere not only of women but of man also. But when people speak of that life as woman's proper sphere, they seem to mean that she has no other duties than those that are called domestic. Katyani. What other duties can a woman have? Religious duties. They are included in the domestic. Helping at sacrifices, praising the gods, vows, fasting, and the like. Every married woman has to discharge these duties. Maitreyi. Can you conceive of no duties for women beyond these? Is not acquiring the knowledge of the self, Atmagyanam, an important duty? Katyani. Yes, that is the duty of the learned, but how many learned women are there? It is only ladies like your aunt who have time and ability enough for such pursuits that can strive for acquiring self-knowledge. It is mainly the duty of man. Maitreyi, it is only in man that the self exists, or is it in woman also? Katyani, smiling. Certainly in woman also, otherwise how could we see, hear and understand? Maitreyi, is it equally in both or more in man than in women? Katyani, smiling again, equally in both, there is no difference between the sexes in this respect. Maitreyi, and there is no liberation without the knowledge of the self. Yajnavalkya's wife does not need to learn this from me. Katyani, no, I have heard this too. Maitreyi, and is it also true that liberation is worthy attaining both for man and women? Katyani, yes, there is no doubt about it. Maitreyi, then why are women so forgetful of liberation, and why do they think of the pursuit of knowledge as the special duty of man? Women should indeed mind domestic duties just as men attend to the acquisition of wealth and other worldly duties. But the difference is that while men, notwithstanding their worldly duties, do not forget that the attainment of liberation is the main end of life. Women, when they have done their domestic duties, think they have done everything required of them. Can self forgetfulness go further? Katyani, you are quite right, my dear. Your words seem to open my eyes. The difference of sex makes the worldly duties of men and women somewhat different, but there is no such difference in the self. The same great self is in all, so I have heard, therefore it is equally the duty of man, both men and women, to strive after self-knowledge, after the attainment of liberation. Your words have made this truth clear to me today. My husband told me all this long ago, but I did not understand him then. I now see that it is their own fault that women do not try to acquire the knowledge of higher subjects. I am specially to blame. My opportunities are great and yet I am doing nothing. Maitreyi, you are most fortunate. It is by the accumulated merit of many virtuous lives that you have got such a husband. I wonder how women, especially those of the higher classes, who are allowed to choose their own husbands, come to select only wealthy and pleasure loving young men as the partners of their lives. Why don't they seek such learned, thoughtful, and saintly men as your husband, such as may help them in attaining liberation? At this stage of the conversation, one of Katyani's men servants arrived with a palanquin and, being admitted into the presence of the lady, said to his mistress, Madam, your children and their nurse think you have been too long away from home and wish your immediate return. Day is nearly spent and your planking is ready. What are your orders? Katyani rose as she heard this. It was the first time in her life that she had spent such a long time in conversation on spiritual matters. Now, the very mention of her children and the thought that so many things at home required her care and supervision made her mind restless, and taking a hasty leave of her friends at Mitra's house, she hurried home under the escort of her servants. While busy in household duties, Katyani could not but turn her thoughts to the important conversation she had with Maitreyi. Its more thoughtful portion its more thoughtful portion, however, became gradually more and more dim and hazy to her. But her mind turned again and again to that portion of it in which Maitreyi had condemned the bad selection of husbands by high class women in general and expressed deep admiration for her own husband. She connected this with Maitreyi's expressed desire not to marry, and with what little she had heard from the other female members of Mitra's family about Maitreyi's disinclination to marriage. All this naturally led her to ask herself, can it be that Maitreyi would be glad to be my husband's wife? Ah, what a beautiful union would it have been! What a help would each have been to the other's liberation. I am a most unworthy wife of Yajnavalkya. But these feelings continued only as long as the union of Maitreyi and Yajnavalkya seemed something that might have been but was now impossible. When, however, from certain indications she found out that in some quarters it was thought of as something quite possible, and even as something that ought to be promoted. A struggle of a serious nature began in her soul. Its character can be better imagined than described. It made her restless for days and weeks, but at last her soul triumphed over it. How how full and glorious the triumph was will appear from her subsequent conduct. She had not yet mentioned the matter in her conversations with her husband, but she had been observing that ever since the tiger incident, two gentlemen whom she did not know personally came to see her husband very often and had sometimes long conversations with him. They were no other than the two Kshatriyas who had saved his life. One day seeing him close One day seeing him closeted with Vishnu Mitra for hours and guessing from some signs that the conversation related to Maitreyi, she inquired of him about its purport, which resulted in a long conference between husband and wife. We shall hear a part of what they said to each other. Yajnavalkya, how strange, have you no objection to this? Katyani, far from having any objection, I have told you plainly I shall be very happy if it take place. I shall rather be sorry if you give up the idea. Yajnavalkya, will you not be jealous of her? Katyani, if I had any doubt of the depth of your love for me, I might have been jealous. As matters stand now, I feel no jealousy. Yajnavalkya, how do you know that I shall not come to love her more than you by and by? Katyani, you have told me plainly the nature of your feelings for her. Yajnavalkya, they may be gradually changed, they may become deeper. Katyani. I am prepared for that change. I shall not feel myself wronged. If it does take place, she deserves to be loved more. And after all, loving this or that person is not for the sake of the person, but for the absolute that is in all, as you have often said. I don't quite understand these abstruse matters, as you know, but my recent struggles have led me to resolve that as your wife, I must try to rise above my petty, selfish feelings. However, the exact attitude of my mind in regard to this matter is that though you may marry a second wife, you will never be able to love her more than me. Yajnavalkya smiling. Your confidence in your own lovableness seems rather extreme. However, I would not seek it even if I could. There were many more such conferences between husband and wife before the final conclusion was reached. These conferences showed that Katyani was more willing to have a co-wife than Yajnavalkya to have a second wife. She must have been a strange woman and I must condemn her. And with the light that 4,000 years have shed on me, I must condemn Yajnavalkya the more for being a bigamist. But we must see him as he was and as he thought, and this is what I have tried to do. The marriage took place just 2 years after the events related in our first chapter.